Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Judy and you are watching Running So and So, and thank you so very much for joining me here today. It's lovely to have you with me. Now this video is a first for me. I am going to do a sew along for the wonderful Revel Topper, which is a relatively new pattern from SH7. Some of you will remember that earlier this year I was fortunate enough to be one of the pattern testers. So let's have a look at the Revel Topper. Now I am going to stand up, move back a little bit. Here you go. So here it is. It does have the most beautiful shawl style collar, and I'm going to apologise here because I've got it out the wardrobe to pop it on for this first bit of my vlog. I think it's got caught on the coat hanger when I've ironed it. So it comes in three separate styles. Now I'll put a picture in a minute, but I've done the style with a dropped sleeve, which has just the most beautiful little gentle cuff here. And here it has a seam straight the way down here, so you're joining the back to the front across the shoulder and down, and the collar is all integral to it. And inside here you have a little facing. There is a very nice long dart here in a style of a French dart, but it's not a true French dart because it doesn't come from the bottom. So here you go, the beautiful Revel. So the Revel Topper comes in three different styles. You have a little cap sleeve, you have a little gentle sleeve like I am making, and you have the most stunning kimono sleeve. And I think if you had a piece of silk to make it in, it would look just outstanding. But I haven't chosen silk. I have chosen a beautiful little seersucker fabric that we got in a Beyond the Pink door box. Oh, possibly a couple of years ago, but I've had it in my stash and I've not used it. So let's have a look at the first thing that you need to do. And I'm going to go through this step by step, and I'm really sorry if some of the steps will seem obvious to you. Just skip forward. But hopefully I might come out with a little tip that you might find helpful. So let's start with step number one, cutting. To cut out, you will need your instructions, you will need your paper pattern, a tape measure. That is a steel tape measure. I will show you how I use that in a minute, or a standard tape measure, or a standard retractable tape measure. I've got loads of tape measures here. Pins. I use scissors, and maybe some tailor's chalk. And underneath here, underneath it all, if I wish to lengthen, will use a quilter's ruler. I find these very easy to use, and I will show you how. Now the first thing you will need to do is to check your measurements on the pattern. And I have got these pattern pages ready. I have chosen not to share my own personal measurements with anybody, but I always check my measurements and I make to my measured size. If I wish to then check the ease, I then take away the actual measurement from the ease measurement to check the ease. It's only at that point, if I decide I would like more ease, that I will decide if I'm going to grade up or I'm going to grade down. I do know with the Revel Topper I sit in one exact size. You will then need to get out the instruction page that shows you how to lay out the pattern pieces for your chosen size and width of fabric. Now it's very important when you're choosing your fabric that you make certain you know exactly how wide your fabric is. So I have laid this out. I know in advance that this fabric is 128 centimetres wide. It is not 150 centimetres wide, which is your standard for a wider width fabric. So it is approximately 22 centimetres narrower, and I thought it was a wider fabric, so it's a good job I checked that. So when I cut this out, because my confession is I had a bit of a cutting out session and I've already cut it out, and then I thought, whoops, I should have filmed that. So I've had to relay out with the little bit that was left, and it is a true remnant because there's over 1 metre of it. So I'm just using this little bit here just to show you what I would do. So I have created my fold on the far side. Let me just twist the camera around so that you can see that. And then I would pin down there really close up to the fold so that I'd know I'd got a crisp finish there. I've also got a fold here, and on this side I could actually cut out your little bit of facing. Now, do not be worried if you need to put your pattern piece face down. So for this one here, I can put it here on this little piece here like so. But before you cut out, the one little tip I would give you is using your steel rule, which is, now the steel rule, in my opinion, is the best way of getting an accurate measurement across your fabric. These dressmakers tape measures are fine, but look, there's a little bump in there. It's not as flat as this one. And I've got this tape measure here, and that has a similar thing. I have to force it to go flat, but even then it bobbles up on itself like so. So my late husband's garden measuring tape measure, or measuring in the house measure, is the best thing. So I'm looking here, and I love the way with sewing you go from metric to imperial, just like that. I've got the tape measure laid on, and it's measuring an accurate 19 inches down here. 19 inches there. Check across here. Where's my fold? Lovely 19. So I'm going to come to measuring the other side, and this is when it becomes very important, because there's one piece that needs to go on the straight grain. So on this side here, I can now pin this one in place. If I wanted to add any length to it, because it is a straight down top here, using my quilter's ruler, I laid on, because I did add extra length, I wanted 3 inches. So I'm turning the ruler, I simply lay that on there, and using the chalk, I went across to give myself the mark. Here I've got the facing. Just realised the facing's not in the screenshot. Here it is. Here is the facing. We know that this is an accurate measurement all the way down here of, look at that, 6. So we know that if we pin this down here, just like so, we're going to have that exactly on the straight grain. Now there is one other piece that needs to be cut out, and this is the piece I want to show you how to cut out, because this needs to go on the grain. What you need to do is to make certain that when you fold over your fabric, the section that you are cutting out at every single point down there is the same measurement. And we've just gone down and we've checked 6 inches. 6. And 6. But that's not the only measurement you have to do. Now it's really important that these pieces are absolutely accurately measured, because it's to do with how the garment will fall and how, in this case, a cuff will fall. Here we need this on the straight grain because this is the centre of your garment and you want it to lay dead straight on you. So here, excuse me reaching across for the pins, let me show you how to measure the straight grain on a pattern piece. Now I'm sure some of you will know exactly how to do this, but let me show you again. Apologies if you already know and you think I'm teaching you how to suck eggs, as the saying goes. So I'm going to pin it on with a pin, and the pin goes perpendicular to the straight grain. Let me see if I can zoom in on that pin. Well, here is the pin. It is perpendicular to the arrow. You then take the measure, and again, this is why I love the steel rule. You hook the end of the steel rule over the edge of your fabric and you measure. Now, do not know how I've done this, but it says 3 inches. So I could have 3 inches, or I could have, oh no, it's not 3 inches, she says, going back to it. No, I'm not, I'm going to measure this in centimetres. It's 7.4 centimetres. So let me zoom out. So 7.4 is where we want it. Now this is the point where you can pivot your pattern piece, because you've got it securely held at this end. And this is why I am a slow sewer, because I am the person that measures the grain. So what I do, because I've got this tape measure, and it sort of suspends itself above. I wish you could see it because there's a little gap just there, which is brilliant. I can lay the tape measure over the top of the pattern piece, and I'm just going to have to think while I'm doing this. I can line up that arrow absolutely perfectly, pop in another pin, and then I can double check it. 7.4, 7.4, I can put my pins around, I can cut it out, and I know it's fine. And that's how I cut out. So, as I said earlier, a quick, and those are the pattern pieces already done. So it's back over to the sewing machine, and let's do the tailor's tacks. I have put a tailor's tack here where this tail notch here marks the bottom of the stitching. I've also put a tailor's tack in here, which is the area that marks where you slit to. I have similarly done the same in this piece here, and again to the stitching line, to the cutting line. I am now going to show you again how I did the tailor's tack at the top of the dart. So it's simply in, there's a little stitch like this, pull through, and another little stitch round like so, and then you simply snip it off. To release your tailor's tack, you take the pins out around, put your hand underneath, a little tiny pinch, and it will come through. I have also added tailor's tacks at the bottom of the dart here and here, as opposed to using the notches that you will find on your pattern. I have also added length to my Revel Topper. Do check the finished length to make certain it is the right length for you. Rather than opening up here because it's a square pattern, I have just added my length on the bottom. I do not know if I need all the length that I have added, but I would rather add too much and then shorten than not have enough altogether. So I'm going to take off the pins here, and then I'm going to show you how to fold out the dart. So I'm going to remove the pattern piece, and it will show here that I have got my dart mark. So I have got my tailor's tacks here. There's an extra double one there because I hadn't turned the camera on, and I've got the two here at the bottom, and I've also got my tailor's tacks here. You can just see them. If you get a blended in thread, it's actually better because if they don't all come out, no one's going to spot them. So let's have a look at pulling them through. So the next thing with the tailor's tack is you need to give it a little pull like so, and then you snip the threads. And if I need, yes, you need to make certain you've got threads on both sides for matching up. When you pull it, there's a limit that you can't pull it anymore. I know some of you are going to be thinking, my gosh, this is taking time. Could have got those darts done by now. You want those darts accurate. So regarding the centre front where I put in those other marking darts, I've opened them out. I can see they are just here and here. That's all I need, is just to be able to see them. I also have them again on the facing piece. That's the arm piece. Here is the facing piece here. Oops. The facing piece here and here. So let's make the dart. So to make the dart, you're pulling up where you've got your little tip of the tailor's tacks. That's the tip of the dart. And pop in a pin perpendicular. And then at the bottom here, you match your darts underneath. So you've got two little marks. Put one on top of the other like so, and you will have your dart. And at that point, if you feel you need to, you can move and smooth over the fabric to make certain it sits properly, but you know where you're sewing to. You're sewing down through there into the join. And here I have my dart. You have to be very careful that you don't catch it so that it rolls the wrong way. Your dart should fall into place naturally. If you tip through there, you'll see that you're roughly in the right place. This dart is not quite in the right place. It's always good if it's not in the right place when you're trying to do a demonstration, because it shows that you're thinking about what it is that you're doing, and that will fall neatly there. And then the same again on the other side. The first thing I'm going to do is to sew the dart in place. It's quite a long dart. Sometimes it's recommended when you've got a very long dart like this that you actually draw your stitching line in using a ruler and one of these heat soluble pens. And if you wish, you can actually draw on your stitching line. And when you have a very long dart like this, it can be recommended that that's what you do. But when you do, if you do decide to do this, you need to make certain that you have everything lined up correctly. So I've got the tip of the dart here. So there you go, I've checked, I have got my line, and my line does go all the way through to the tip here. So let's do the other side. So we've got them both the same, so you can see what I'm doing. This is not something that I would ordinarily do. I'm doing this to help you, because that's the whole point of a sew-along, isn't it? To give you some tips. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to be working through this pattern as in line with the instructions, which are just here on my sewing table. So the first thing I always recommend everyone to do is to do a stitch test. Now, we all have our own visions and ideas behind the length of the stitch that we wish to sew on our sewing machines. Some of us sew automatically on the stitch length that it's preset to. I like to have a slightly longer stitch. My needle is a 70 titanium needle. Titanium needles are sharper and last for longer. I have a Metaller fine cotton silk finish thread in the machine, and my machine likes a Metaller thread, but it's equally okay with Gutermann. You need to check your threads and you need to decide which one works best in your machine. The variety of needle and the variety of thread will affect the stitch that your machine does. So I'm going to turn my stitch length up to 3.3. This is because when I learnt to sew, I was told that you're basically damaging the threads in your fabric when you put a stitch through it. So a longer stitch is better than a shorter one, which is why I don't do stay stitching as well. So let's just do a quick stitch test and hope to goodness the machine is going to behave itself. I have an integrated differential feed on this sewing machine, and that is down, you can't see it because it's all hidden. My machine's got a very bright light around here, and every time I try and zoom in on it, it doesn't work very well. Yeah, I'm literally just in here. So let's just keep going. I always, if your machine has the option to leave the needle in the stitch down position, I always recommend it. So we now know we've got a good stitch, so let's go ahead and let's sew the darts. That is the first job to be done. This is a fairly swift make, but famous last words, because every time you say something like that, you can guarantee something will go wrong. So starting with the dart, well, as you know that I did actually draw the line on, so let's stitch down here. This is a long dart, and off we go. Now, because I've done Tailors Tacks in here, always the first thing I do straight away when I've finished is I whip the Tailors Tacks out so that they're not left in the body of the garment. So the next thing I'm going to be doing is turning over the hems, and this is, if you're following along, is number 2. The hems on the hem on the wrong side. Now here it's 1 centimetre, and I am using a hot hemmer. I have various hot hemmers, and the one I'm using today is the Clover one. I do have the lovely new one from Generates, the flexi curve one, but I'm not going to be using that today because it takes a little bit of guessing, I think. So I'm going to turn over these hems, and the one down the side here is slightly curved, but with this hot hemmer you can turn it over at the end. Just use the end of it and work your way down. So we've got the ends turned up. Now the next thing you have to do is you have to pin down the center. So what I've done is I have securely pinned the two pieces of the collar. So I have the collar facing pinned to the actual top garment. It's right sides together. So you have the choice. You can do your collar facing showing or your collar facing on the inside. The version I'm doing is collar facing on the inside. Now I know that I need to pin down here, which is where the stitching line is, but I am going to mark on my stitching line using my friction pen again, and my stitching line comes all the way down to my second Tailors Tack, which is here. Please excuse my telephone having a ping. And there's my first one. So I need to leave this in. So the stitching line, or if I mark the cutting line on, the cutting line, and remember if you use a friction pen it will iron out, and it's not one of those that will disappear with just the general atmosphere. I've got one for the embroidery and that disappears. So you've got that line there. Now the stitching line is just a little bit longer, it's a little bit lower. I have read ahead in the instructions because the instructions show you here that you're pinning along that centre line on both sides, but it implies that you've already cut the slit. Now I have not cut my slit. I have drawn a line all the way down my slit. So I've drawn a line from the top here all the way down to initially first where the slit is cut to, and then just slightly extended it to where the stitching turning point is. And what they're suggesting you do is you are then going to stitch 1/4 of an inch either side of that line. So I'm just going to draw a line down here from 1/4 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, or 1/4 of an inch. I wonder what that is in centimetres. I should know that quickly, shouldn't I? 6 millimetres, but believe me, 1/4 of an inch is easier to find on your ruler. All the way down to my stitching mark, and on the other side, 1/4 of an inch, all the way down to my stitching line. And if you put that sewing line in, it's going to help you. Now I have a patchwork foot for my sewing machine, and that is really useful as a guide, but I'm actually going to just mark on 1/4 of an inch up here. I am not going to cut down that centre line until I have done my stitching. You can see just down here that I have drawn a line, and along that line I have got the pins perpendicular, and the line in the centre is actually the cutting line, and I'm going to stitch along the line that is 1/4 of an inch all the way down the side of the cutting line to the bottom of my 2 Tailors Tacks, pivot at the bottom, and then come back up the other side. There is no point me showing you it in the sewing machine because the light in the machine is so bright it's reflecting straight back at the camera. So what I shall do is I'll go down and then back up again, and then when I'm ready to cut that I shall come back to you. Is cutting. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the pins around the edge as long as I can, because that will become important. It's really important at the moment that this is kept stable. So I am cutting down, I'm making certain I've got this completely on the flat and there's nothing underneath it. So let's go. And I'm literally going to cut it really gently. And remember, slow and steady saves the race. I have made it through to this Tailors Tack here. And the next bit here is it's really delicate cutting. And at point 2D, it is recommended that you clip the bottom slit close to the bottom stitching, taking care not to clip through the stitching. So I haven't got clips, I've got a very fine pair of scissors. These are the scissors that came in my adorable little thread catcher that was gifted to me, and I'm going through and I've gone as close to the stitching as I possibly can. So I've opened up the neckline and now I need to iron this flat. Now your instruction is number 2E, and it's this one here where the neckline is folded out. Now watch this for magic. You open it up like so, flick it towards you, and then you've got your two pieces. This is one side of your front and here's the other side, out the other side, and you've got your join in the middle here. Now this will come into shot in a minute, because basically what you're doing is you are opening out this seam. She says, desperately trying to get her fingers into it. There we go. It's a very narrow seam because it is only 1/4 of an inch wide, and you slip in your sewing machine. I'll take that out. You slip in your iron, and using the end of your iron you will be able to push the seam apart, and it will open the seam and iron it flat simultaneously. It's now going to come back towards you. I love this bit of sewing. It's when you're pushing the seam down with your iron, like so, like that. And then you go out to the other end. I'm going to turn it around. So now I'm doing the other end, the other side rather than the other end of the front. I'm going to open up that seam again using my little scissors. And then you literally pull this to the inside like so, and you will have that round. Now this is the point where, have I got that turned properly? And the answer is no, I need to snip in a little bit more. So back I come, and it is a little snip. First thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to remove the tailor's tacks, and to do that I'm going to use a pair of tweezers, and these are the ones that I got in my overlocker. And remove the tailor's tacks from both sides, and if you use the flat bit of your tweezer here, you will be able to grab your tailor's tacks without affecting the fibres in your work. So at this point we do not need the tailor's tack anymore, especially at the bottom. I can't get that one. Come on, there we go. So I just need to snip into this a little bit more, and it's always good not to snip right to the bottom straight away. Now I can see exactly what I've done wrong, but it's really important that I don't go too far. Back we go and have another look. And you'll know the minute that it's going to turn, it will turn perfectly like that. So now I've got that turned perfectly. Because I've opened the seam up here, this will fold over and you can iron it flat. Once you have turned your facing through, you're able to iron it and fold it over, and it creates this fantastic, really sharp edge. Now, I'm a bit of a fusspot, so what I'm going to do now is I am going to tack along that edge, but I'm not going to film myself doing it. And what you have to do, the next step is 2, and this is step 2H. You are to sew down around the edge of the facing. Now, I am going to top stitch mine, and I'm going to top stitch it from the back. And my top tip for anything like this, where you are top stitching and creating a finish for your main garment, is to tack it down. So on this side here, I have started tacking just down here, because I'm actually on the virtual sewing room. It's Thursday morning, so I've just muted everybody. So I'm tacking down there, and I'm going to then what I call flat tack across here. Why I didn't do this earlier, but I mentioned earlier that when you are tailor's tacking, it is really good to have a really close match. So what I'm going to show you here is I'm going to tack down the edge of where I'm going to top stitch. It doesn't have to be a tiny tack. For me, I just think it's good practice. It helps get your accurate finish first time, and you don't have to redo it. So I'm just tacking down here. I am going quite quickly, but hopefully you can now see I have got tacking stitches in red. But what I'm going to do is to show you now what I mean by this huge flat tacking. And it is literally just a really big zigzag. And one way I would suggest you do it is on one side of your zigzag, do 3 little tacks, like so. And then when you come back down the other side, do your big stitch, and then back up the other side, 3 little stitches. And in doing that, I'm hoping that that is more visible. Yes, it is. In doing that, you are securing this facing flat on your garment. Now, the Revel Topper, as I was on a Pink Door Zoom last night, several people said to me, oh, isn't that meant to be in a floaty fabric? Well, no, it's not. It can be in any fabric that has got, it can't be a heavyweight fabric. It needs to be a lighter weight fabric. Let's just double check the fabric, because I know that when Peggy did fabric suggestions, the Revel Topper is designed for fluid, less structured woven fabric with some drape so that the sleeves can hang properly. Less structured fabrics usually have some natural give to them, allowing for a smoother construction of the shawl collar. So she's suggesting light to medium weight linen, linen viscose blends, rayon, challis, or even a silk. Cotton gauze can also make a very nice Revel Topper. So although this is not necessarily a fluid fabric, it isn't totally structured, and it will give a slightly firmer finish. And it's also an excellent fabric for me to demonstrate the making techniques, because I know that when I'm making it for you, nothing will move. If you are using anything with viscose in or silk, and you come to do this collar and this facing, you will need to use the techniques that I'm showing you now, because when I made the one I was wearing at the beginning of the video, I needed to flat tack that in order to get this line of top stitching perfect. But I know from even holding this up now, this will make a lovely Revel Topper, and it will give me the coverage that I'm looking for Sew Skin Summer, to protect me against the sun, and primarily that is why I chose to use this fabric. But we're doing well at the moment. I'm going to do my tacking and I'll see you back at the sewing machine. So I'm now ready to do my top stitching. I'm going to top stitch around the edge here, but I'm actually going to use an edging foot. Now, I've shown the edging foot before, but the edging foot is the one where you have a little ridge on the foot here, and you butt that against the edge of the fabric that you wish to sew against. And if you've got an integrated differential feed and your foot takes it, don't forget to engage it, because it will affect the quality of your stitch. So I've put my stitch up to a top stitching length, because this will come through, and I need to move the needle away from the center mark, because I just want it to go just inside the edge here. I'm going to stitch that and I will be back with you very soon. Next off, it's remove the tacking from where you've done your top stitching. If you get a little bit of thread fluff, do not worry. In time, it will work itself out. This is why I tend to use a blended in colour for my tacking. But today it was not necessary. I needed to use red. So I've still got the red round this edge here. That is to form the edge. And I never do understitching, and the understitching isn't mentioned on the pattern. It's folded to create a lovely edge. So this is why I have ironed it flat. I have put in a layer of tacking. I will keep ironing it, and then just before I'm ready to wear it, I'll whip out that tacking. So now we're on stage 3A, which is just here, and we are sewing the collar together behind her. And you have to get the seam in the center. Those two bits of the seam on both sides have got to match. So to make it easier, I have pinned one end of the collar and the other end of the collar. I have a pin there ready, and in order to get these two seams to line up exactly, you need to put one on top of the other, take your pin, and you need to go directly through the center of the seam on one side, and it has to pop out directly in the center of the seam on the other side. And then it's just like putting a pin in, but you go down in the center of the seam on one side, and the needle has to come back through the center of the seam on the other side. And I've done it, but it takes a bit of jiggling. Then you can put on your horizontal pin to hold it in place, and then you can sew it, which is what I'm going to do next. So I've just ironed the seam open over the top of my tailor's ham. It is a curved seam, and I can confirm, I don't even know if you're going to see it, but I have actually got that perfect cross. So now it's a question of flipping that over like so and opening it out and then ironing it down flat with your iron. This is where my iron is turned off, and I'm just using a little bit of residual heat. And that is that section done. So I am just going to, I don't even think I need to, so you've now got the back of the collar. But that is how your collar is formed. Next stage here is sewing the back to the front. Now, it is recommended that you sew this garment together using French seams, and this is a very tricky seam across the shoulders, neck and second shoulder, but you can do it as a French seam. I have done it already. So in order to get the neck in the right place, I pinned the first shoulder from the tip of the cuff on the arm to the neckline, and on the other side I went the same direction, so I was just left with the neckline. There are two very, very clear marks. You can see where the back comes up and goes down. At that point you will have to do a pivot. So let's go to the sewing machine and let me show you what I mean. Now, instruction 4B clearly tells you that you are sewing along the shoulder seam here with a scant 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam. So off we go. And I've checked forward by reading the instructions, because I have to guide you through how deep the next seam is going to be. So off we go. Let's lift this up. Now, to mark the pivot point, I have put my pin in perpendicular, and I'm hoping that on one of these you will be able to see it. It is this one here that is poking out. So as we come up to it, and although I have just sewn fairly swiftly on my sewing machine, I do not like going fast. I love the idea of the speed control on my sewing machine, and I love it because I can take it steadily. Now I have always, if I can, leave my needle in the down position. Now I'm going to pivot, because you will see here is the seam, and as I'm sewing it, it's got a little bit of a bump in here. So what I'm going to do is to lift up my foot, the joys of electronic sewing machines, and I am simply going to give it a little tiny twist. My pin is in perpendicular. Believe me, when my finger is tapping, that's the tip of the pin. You can press the foot down and carry on, and because the pin is perpendicular, it can come out later. And again, straight the way through with that scant 1 centimetre seam through to the next pin, and again, leave it down. Now, I need to pull this round so that I'm sewing down here, organise the fabric underneath so that you're not creating any kind of puckers. Press the foot down and off we go, and I have got a pin straight there, and I'll catch you at the end. At this point there are so many instructions I need to point out to you that you need to follow through where your instructions are. This is a section for the shoulder and neck French seams. So I can go on to the next page, as that will tell me how to finish off the French seam. What we have to do now is we need to trim this seam off. But before I do, let's turn it over and make certain we've got an absolutely clear seam. Checking here at the neckline. And we have a lovely seam here. So I am going to trim that down, and I'll be back with you in a minute when I've got my scissors out. So before I've just put my iron on to warm up, and before I fold this seam back, I am simply going to loosen this tacking off that I popped in, because I won't need it now. I have made notes following my first making of this top, and it does say that when I prep for the French seam across the neck, it does say I might need to tack again. So we'll have a little look at that when it comes through. I always feel that if you can take the time to tack a seam, yes, I know it takes time, but what you want ultimately is the best garment that you can have. And if it means take 5 minutes to tack, take 5 minutes to tack. So I need to trim the seam down. So I shall grab my dressmaking scissors, which are just here, and I am just going to trim this very gently across here, being very careful not to catch any other fabric. I've got my hand underneath my scissors. I'm guiding the tip of my scissors, feeling my way across as I go. I have the garment laid out in front of me so that I cannot catch anything. You can hear my iron there. I'm just coming up to the twist I've got here at the neck where I pivoted. And as you can see, I have already removed my red tacking. I'm very sorry, I should have done the Tailors Tacks earlier in red, but I'm not going back to do them again now because we're well on with the garment make. So I'll pause there as I go across. So I have now ironed the top and the bottom of this seam, and I have been able to fold it so that I have a beautiful crisp edge here. Now putting my pins in vertically as I pin this together, I've already done the other side. I wanted to make certain I knew what I was doing. Not that I know what I'm doing, but I wanted to get my words ordered. Now as I pin down there, I'm just going to tell you that instruction 4D tells you that your seam allowance here again is 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimetre or 10 millimetres, depending on how you want to read that. I'm just going around here and making certain I've got my vertical pins on the same side, because when I did it on the other side, I put them on the other side of the shoulder. And you don't want them scratching the sewing machine now, do we? And just going back to the top, I've left this one open. Where you've got your pivot point, you will still see that. And it is very, very clear to see it because the collar will fold. As you go round that pivot point, you have got to be so very careful that you don't catch any other fabric and therefore end up with a pucker in your fabric. So there we go. I'm going round that bend now, folding the collar towards me to keep it out of the way to allow me to sew a flat 1 centimetre seam around there. Now my advice to you will be that when you're sewing it, you sew with the collar uppermost. So let me spin you round to the sewing machine and we'll sew this down. Here we are, straight across. I'm just going to go as far as that first pivot. Now when your pins are in perpendicular, as mine are here, you can sew over them. So I can sew over that first one, and here I come up to the tricky part, and it is here that I do not want to have any puckers at all. And I'm really hoping that you can see what I can see. But what I'm doing is sewing very slowly, because I can see a potential hazard coming up, and I am going to literally very carefully ease the fabric through so that I don't get an unnecessary pucker. So it's 2 stitches, 3 stitches. I'm going to lift up again and have another look. And I'm at the point I can see what I'm coming up against here. 1, 2. And another 1. There we go, that was 2. And now I can bend round the corner, and I am on to the collar. I am sewing the collar down at the other side. And this is known as feeding your fabric through, and I would say that this is the trickiest part of the whole garment, and that is fixing the collar on at the back, because you're using a French seam. This is a very straightforward pattern to make, but it just has this exquisite detail in the collar that allows you to have an absolutely stunning finish. So I will see you at the end, because I want to sit back and focus on doing the other collar without the camera. So here we go. We have a beautiful neckline encased in a French seam. So the next job, apart from sitting back and admiring your work, is moving on to your armhole finishing. Now I am doing version B, and this is the point where you need to start to carefully look at the instructions. There are several versions, and each version has its own set of instructions. Armhole and side seams version B. So we're going to start by ironing up 3/8 of an inch. So again, using my hot hammer, ironing over 1 centimetre hem allowance. There we go. Hot hammer on, turning up 1 centimetre, coming in from the side we have the iron, and there you go. Armhole band goes along here. So before I start, I'm literally just going to give that seam a little press. I'm going to whip round and do the other side. Here she is. Quick press. I'm going to take an armhole, and that simply is pinned on here. Pinned on here, both sides, and seamed down. And I'll be back when I have done those seams. So I have sewn my seam 1.5 centimetres, and the next thing I'm going to do is to add a little bit of edge stitching or under stitching to it. I'm going to do it as a feature. So I'm going to start by pushing forward here, because this will be seen. So I'm pushing towards the armhole facing on both sides. And I'm going to do this in reverse. I'm pushing towards the armhole facing, and I'm actually going to do my stitching first. I'm going to change to my edge stitching foot, and I'm going to go over by 3, which is what I did before. And it is literally, oh, where's it gone? This is what I've got with this fabric, and I've gone the wrong way. So here is my little ditch, and my little line here has got to sit in my little ditch. But I put the needle this side, and it should be the other side, so just flick it back, and I am going to do a line of top stitching. I did my last top stitching on 4mm, so off we go on 4mm and down we go. So I'm just going to do these 2 lines of understitching and I will be back with you. Sewn down the seam here with a lovely little edge stitching stitch, and now I'm going to trim back the seam like so. I'm going to do that on both sides, and at that point it is again wrong sides together and pinning the side seams, ready to do your French seams on the side seams. Next up we have finally sewing the side seams here. Now earlier you had the choice of actually finishing those with like an overlocking if you wish to, but it is possible to French seam them, so let's French seam them. Now the seam allowance given at this point is 1.5 centimetres or 5/8 of an inch. I have got 1/8 of an inch marked on my sewing machine, so I am going to do my first stitching at 2/8 of an inch and the second one at 3/8 of an inch. So come over here and have a little look at what I'm going to do. So here we go. I need to make my stitch length smaller, and I have got here on my sewing machine, I have got, this is 2/8 of an inch, 3, 4, 5. So 2 and 3 make 5, so off I go, and it is slow and steady because I really don't want to lose this. If I can keep this accurate now, it makes it easier all the way around. So I'm going to do these 2 rows of stitching and I'll be back with you very shortly when it comes to opening them out, because you need to clip the seam under the arm. So using a little pair of very fine scissors, I'm just going to give a little tiny clip into the curve. A really, really fine, not all the way through to the seam, just a little tiny stitch, because I need it to go out. I don't need it to have any bulk taken out. I just need the seam opening very slightly. Then we go down there. There we go. There we go. And it will now open straight. So let's do the other side. And then it's just a matter of ironing that seam as flat as you can get it, and then folding it to the, so you've got right sides together, and then sewing up the second seam. So that will now go straight. So let's just turn it through and have a little iron on the inside. This just helps to flatten the seam. And I've of course got the iron right next to the camera, but you're ironing to flatten that seam. I'm just going to work on one side with you. I'm not going to do both sides because obviously filming all of that will get a little bit boring for you because you know what you're doing on the second side. So you're ironing that seam as flat as you can get it. Don't worry if you're creasing the rest of your garment. You can iron that later. You're only focused on the one seam at the moment. So, and then it's literally a question of pinching it together. So you've got the seam like so with your little, you're creating the seam to look like so. You do another one there. And here I know that I'm going over. So I'm folding out the seam to bring the stitching line from the wrong sides together part of the French seam together, pulling it so that the seam comes to the surface, and then pinning down to create that lovely encasing that you get when you do a French seam. And I'm simply going to work my way down to the bottom here and then do the same on the other side. And I'll show you when I've done both sides before I start stitching. Now then, I have now pinned all these side seams together, and as you can see I now have a beautiful curve, because just by clipping in, and when you open it out, it'll make its own little V, rather than, it's not a notch that you need to remove. So now I'm going to do 3/8 of an inch stitching all the way round. Oop, I've gone down too far there. And off I go around the top. Like, this top is so nearly finished. And I'll see you. And there you go, a beautiful French seam. It is so easy to do just by clipping those curves, and you actually have a beautiful finish on the inside. Now, I'm not going to iron that sleeve yet. I'm going to move straight on to the cuffs. Now, the cuffs you work from on the wrong side of the garment. So I now have to fold it back. The right side and the wrong side of this fabric are very, very similar. Now, I have got my tailor's ham out here just to make what I'm going to do now a little bit easier. Because obviously you've got a curve in a cuff. Fold over where you've got your 1 centimetre seam allowance on that band. I've done it so that it goes just over the stitching where I sewed the band together. So the idea of that is that I am going to try and stitch in the ditch. So I'm actually putting my pins on the right side of the garment. And it's great, isn't it? Because I want to sew the other way, and I've got the whole garment back to front on itself. Let's turn it round so it's the right way for me now. Hopefully this pin will go in a bit more easily. There we go. And that's 1 row of pins in. You might want to just double check that you've got everything lined up and possibly add in more pins. To make certain that you will clip. What the idea is, when you stitch in the ditch, you catch the fabric behind, and then over to the other side, flipping over the cuff like so, and lining it up so that you have got your French seam all going the same way, flipping over the cuff and catching it down like so. And before I go to the sewing machine for the final time, I am going to do the hem. Now, I'm going to do the hem that they suggest that you add to this, and I need to go from version C all the way through to the hem at the end. They are suggesting you press up by 10mm and then up by another 2.5 centimetres. So let's press up that hem. And when you get to your seam, make certain you press it to the back. Now, I'm not going to use a blind hem on this because I've done top stitching. I am going to do a simple hem, and I'm actually not going to turn it up again by 2.5. I'd like a narrower hem, so I'm actually going to turn it up by 1.5 centimetres as opposed to 2.5 centimetres. So here we go, we're on the final straight. First up, we are going to stitch in the ditch for the armholes. Now, this one you use your edge stitching foot again, and I am going to put the sewing machine inside, and I have got my needles, my pins the wrong way round. So it's foot down, and you are using this lovely sort of ridge thing here on the machine. Has got to fit, can't go any closer, that sits along the line of stitching. So all being well, here goes. That is where your machine will stitch. And the last thing I have to do here is the hem. And as I come to do the hem, the battery is about to run out. And when I've done the hem, I'm absolutely finished. So I'm going to whiz around the hem, and then I'm going to come back to you when I've charged the battery up but I'm using the same edge stitching foot. I'm going to keep going until the camera dies on me. Using the same edge stitching foot, I'm keeping the edge of the foot here to the edge of the shirt. And let's go round. And when I've done this, the top is finished. Full bar ironing and taking out the last little bit of tacking. I'd love, 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 love the camera to last long enough. Time for a bit of fast sewing. I'm halfway round. Don't run out yet, camera. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Keep going, camera. It's on the orange battery, folks. Just as I'm about to do the last little bit of my sew along. Please don't do this to me, camera. Could be worse, I suppose. It could be the card full, but it isn't the card full. It's the battery running out. I'm nearly there, I'm nearly there. With Flash, I've got a new Revel Topper and I absolutely love it. I'm just going to put a little picture montage in here that I've just taken outside in the garden in the beautiful sunshine. And the top feels so comfortable, and it does feel different on to making it in a more fluid fabric. Here's the one I had on earlier. This one definitely drapes and this one will cling more. Let me just show you that. Now both of these tops are made in to exactly the same size. They are, as I've mentioned before, I've taken my measurements. I'm happy with my size measurements. If I'd wanted more ease, I'd have cut out a bigger size. But just here, it seems to hug the body a little bit more when it's in that fluid fabric. Let me go back to this. I'm just going to be realistic because my chair is now further back because Poppy has come and sit on the floor. When I stood up to change, Poppy has come and sat on the floor. So this is what I was saying. Here, it just feels slightly different. It's not that soft drapiness around the body. But I think you can get away with a very lightweight woven fabric. It will give a different feel, but I love it nonetheless. And I did give you all the tips that I picked up when I was making the garment in the more fluid viscose fabric. But for demonstration purposes, I will hold my hands up and say this fabric was absolutely fantastic because I needed a fabric that would behave. Doing a sew along with a viscose is its own separate challenge. I can't get any closer to you, hold on a minute. These are not going to be my only two Revel toppers in my wardrobe. I am absolutely certain I will be making more. It's a lovely make. You've got that just that lovely bit of detail down the neck area and doing your top stitching here, just to give you that little bit of a sewing challenge, just that it's not an easy make, something to get your teeth into, because it is a little fiddly around the back there, as I showed you. And when you're sewing along the back neck here, you do need to be careful. This one is now inside out because I've just taken it off. You do need to be careful across the back because you need to make certain that you do not catch any fabric. And what you can do, and I haven't shown you on the video, is to stitch down your French seam on the inside so you get a lovely feature across the back of the neck and you can carry it on over the shoulder. I haven't done it on this one. That is entirely up to the wearer. I'd love to see your Revel toppers. If you make a Revel topper, please pop it over on Instagram and tag me, which is at running_sew_and_. So it's at the end, running so and so. Tag me in it so I can see your Revel toppers. And also please don't forget to tag at SH7, that's here as well. And that way that Peggy, who is the pattern designer, will see the makes as well. And she loves to see, and I can say that with my heart, Peggy loves to see your makes of her patterns. And as Peggy says, the fabric will make the garment unique to you. So you make the garment in the fabric you think it will make. You could make it in a denim. I mean, it could look totally different. You could have it over the top of something as a firmer overlay for the winter. What about making it a bit of a wool type fabric? A wool crepe would look lovely as a garment over a sort of a long sleeved skyline tee. World's your oyster. Thank you so much for watching. And if you haven't subscribed, just click the little thing that's either, do you know, I think it's here, but there again, it could be there. And I'll see you very soon. Take care.